Hi, very good morning to you. It's Jim from Maverickstar Observatory. Before we begin, big thanks to Lindsay yesterday for chipping in. She was, unfortunately, the only one that did chip in a few bucks for the observatory. And people have got to start realising that, they've been charged with looking after probably now the only public funded observatory left. Let that sink in for a minute. You guys have been charged now with looking after that. We've kept it going for 10 years here and supported you with all the data related to this current anomaly that's taking place. Now, while you're watching this video, I'm going to move on from the funding part. There'll be a link at the end of the video if you want to, donate to it. It's entirely up to you. It doesn't matter. Okay, so let's move on. What's happening right now beneath your feet is changes on an unprecedented scale. I'm going to go through the implications so that you understand completely what is happening and what is likely to happen based on not just facts that we know about here at the observatory, but your other mainstream organisations, to mention just a couple: the ESA, NASA, NOAA. They know exactly what's going on, and it is a big deal because these events come around very rarely. And the image that you're looking at is a planet which is losing its atmosphere because its magnetosphere has weakened to the point where it allows solar wind to strip off its upper atmosphere. And if this was our Earth, it'd probably take around about 400 to 500 years to remove the atmosphere that we rely on. Now, we're going through a magnetic reversal, and everyone knows that the magnetosphere is weakened between 20 and 25% currently. During magnetic reversals, the magnetosphere will not collapse completely. It will dramatically reduce in its strength, perhaps to around, anyone's best guess, I suppose, 15%. Let's say that that's the figure that it reduces to. That's still enough for ionisation to take place in our upper atmosphere, where the solar wind will just decay slowly away the upper atmosphere. Now, we get from some scientists and their organisations that they represent saying that this could take, some say 1,000 years, some say 10,000 years, some say even longer, and that they are hoping that the process of the magnetic reversal is prolonged rather than a short reversal. Well, I just don't understand the mentality behind that, because I would rather the reversal take part very quickly, like what was recorded by some scientists that were studying lava flows on a volcano. They'd done some core samples. As they went further down the lava flow, they found that the magnetic reversal had taken place in a very short space of time, maybe months. They said that, if they was there at the time of the reversal taking place, that they would have possibly even seen the compass needle moving as this process was taking place. But we know 12,000 years ago, it was a failed reversal. It was what's known as an excursion. So, we are right now at this present time experiencing a magnetic pole reversal on our planet. We don't know whether it's going to be a completed reversal or another excursion like what took place 12,000 years ago. The thing is, and this is the big thing, is like you have been asking, what are we going to expect during this time around, whether it's an excursion or, a completed reversal? Well, we are going to experience an increase in the depletion of our magnetosphere. And if it hasn't already started to take place on a very small scale, it will at some point increase, and the sputtering, which is a term known for the decaying of the upper atmosphere through solar winds colliding into the atmosphere, as they do, they create almost like a capillary reaction where it is vacuumed off the planet out into space, our upper atmosphere. Like I said, that would take 400 to 500 years to happen. But, if you just think about it, if enough of this upper atmosphere is removed, even in small quantities, it is going to have very detrimental impacts on our climate. And we're already starting to see, with just the loss of 20%, those impacts on our climate right now. And just to mention a couple, just look at the way our jet streams now are behaving. We have interaction between polar and subtropical on a regular basis. We're seeing interactions now over the equatorial region with tropical in the north southern hemisphere, with tropical jet streams in the southern hemisphere. So you can imagine, we're already seeing devastated impacts to our climate as a result of this weakening magnetosphere, which is caused in turn by the reversal that is taking place. So, if we set aside just the impacts of climate, which are bad on their own terms, and then, focus more on what we've got to deal with as a species on this planet, and not just our species, but every other species, all the biodiversities on this planet have got to deal with this. Only we will be probably the only conscious ones that are aware of what's happening. You try and explain to the migratory sea life animals like whales, sharks and things like that, that depend on the geomagnetic poles and the field strength to navigate around this planet. When we see these animals wash up on our beaches because of navigation as a result already of a weakening magnetosphere and a weakening dipole and a moving dipole, then something that has been natural behaviour for these animals and their ancestors, which has been passed down through, what's the word? Not intuition, but I think you get where I'm coming from. Instinct. They know where to migrate and at what times to migrate, but the magnetism of the Earth is affecting the magnetite in their brains, and that's why they're ending up, in places where they thought they should be in other places. And that's why we see, mass animal die-offs now along our coastlines in the quantities that we are. We are going to see more of that. What can you guys do about it? Well, I've been telling people for years, cities are toxic. They're the worst places to be, and you need a backup plan. And it just depends on whether, you take this serious or not as to how fast you want to react. Because if you leave it to the last minute, you'll be trying to sell up your property at a time where the market will be inundated with properties for sale. Cities are stagnant places. We was coaxed out of the cities 50 years ago, because most of us lived in little villages and little towns around 50 years ago. And the reason why we was coaxed out of them is because the inviting amenities that cities offered, like fresh flowing water by the tap, you didn't have to rely on your well anymore, electricity that didn't falter or break down, sewerage that could be taken out your house. All these things were very inviting, as opposed to the way people were living 50 years ago. And of course, it encouraged people to come into cities, and then cities started to grow. But they are toxic places because they do not self-sustain themselves in the time of crisis. I was talking about when I was in another country only a few weeks ago. I said that you could flick a switch on all technology, and that these people would still easily cope with the day's life, and that's because they're already halfway there, in being self-sufficient in any case. They grow their own food. They've even now gone, which is a surprise to see a developing settlement thrive the way it is. They'd even on this main river got fish farms. That fish that normally live in the river, they're now farming those fish so that they've got ample supplies of these fish readily available for them. So, what I'm saying to you guys is you're not going to have these luxuries in the city. You need to get real. We've been conned. We've been sold cities like, they sold us Las Vegas, and we know how much of a disaster and a rotten place that is, if you've ever been. It's a con. It's an artificial environment from top to bottom. and it is heavily dependent on your labour exchange for money. Whereas, what you need to start doing, what you guys need to start doing is becoming a little bit more self-sufficient, self-dependent on yourselves, and not so much on systems that we have been dependent on. Because just look at how these systems in the cities are treating us now. They're driving us to buy electric cars. If you drive a combustion car, you're being charged extra because of the air pollution that the car causes. And these sort of things in little villages in other third world countries aren't even interested in things like that. We've even had the Indian Prime Minister turn around and say, when our people can live as good as yours in the West, then we'll start taking climate change more serious and investing more in it. That's their attitude. The biggest producers of CO2, even if CO2 was a problem, are countries that are doing the least about it. People like that live in the UK, we're being forced. We're not given an opportunity. We're being forced to do it. Farmers are being forced to close. In Europe, their ancestral farms that have been passed down through generation to generation are being forced to close their farms because of the United Nations have said that they must meet CO2 targets. It's ridiculous. We're going round that wheel faster than we ever have done, and if we stop now, we're going to carry on going round and round out of control. It's time to start taking back a little bit of control for yourselves. And I'm not kidding when I say this, that cities are the last places you want to be, for a multitude of reasons now. Most cities are on the target list to be destroyed in case of ever a severe war breaks out. If you're in a city, you're going to get targeted. If you're in a little village, no one's going to waste expensive munitions on a little village. Trust me, you'll be safer there, unless you're invaded. If there is a coronal mass ejection like what happened in the Carrington event, it'll knock out the grid. And you don't want to be in a city when the grid's knocked out. There'll be no logistics, there'll be no food going in, there'll be no sewerage coming out, there'll be no fresh water going in. You won't be able to go to work. And when you can't go to work, you'll have no more money left. If you had a little holding somewhere, or you was part of a community where you worked to have a little place to stay on that holding of somebody else's, at least if the grid goes out, you'll find ways to sustain a reasonable life. You'll have crops that you'll have grown this year and put away for next year, some for emergencies and some for sale, and maybe some to eat right now. That's the way they do it in these other countries, and those are the ones that are going to thrive during these times. Now, with regards to climate, you got to realise that we're also heading into a glacial period, which is going to shut down most of the northern hemisphere. Excuse me. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. So, yeah, it will shut down most of the northern hemisphere. You probably won't want to be there, but I know it's not easy for people to relocate. These are just things that you have got to really sit down and give some good thought to now, because these things are all at our door and they're coming closer. And these events are real and they're definitely happening. Right now, beneath your feet, there are changes taking place to the internal mechanisms of our core, that dynamo that drives the magnetosphere that protects us. It will damage crops when the magnetosphere collapses. It will have some effects psychologically on animals as well as ourselves. And these events are really, really, really taking place. This isn't science fiction, and people need to get that under the belt, that they're taking place, and that precautions need to be made. Actions need to be taken, and it's better to do it sooner rather than later. If nothing else you can do other than put a little bug-up bag away for your family, that's a little bit of insurance for you and your loved ones, isn't it? That's what we're saying. We're dedicated to trying to help people and keep them informed in these current anomalies that are taking place. And I can't do nothing about the fact that a volcano is going to erupt tomorrow and you're in the path and you haven't got out of the way. I can't do nothing about that. Just like I couldn't help all those people that experienced that really bad earthquake in Turkey recently. I bet you if I'd have given the heads up on that was going to happen 24 hours or 48 hours before it did, the same amount of people would have lost their lives. Because this is another issue we've got a problem with, is that you can tell people of the dangers of these events that are really happening and they still do nothing. And this is one of the things that I am trying to change, and that's the mentality of people with their approach to learning about these events that are taking place. The first and foremost thing is take some form of precautions. If you've been fortunate enough to be one of the few people to know about these events not by an organisation like ours, because it's just a small observatory, but if you've been informed by an observatory like ours, which is independent, doesn't rely on any corporate funding, which is beautiful that we've kept it that way, it means that we're not pressured to talk about certain subjects in preference to others. In other words, we give you the facts the way they are, and we try and encourage you to do something about it. Try and avoid being caught up in one of these events. So there you are. Hopefully we've talked just briefly. This topic could go on for hours and hours, and we could talk about all these things on different levels. If there's something you want me to talk about, just mention it in the comment section of this video, and I do read all the comments, and I'll do my best to answer whatever questions you have. So for now I think that's enough. There's a link down there. I think we can do better than Lindsay on her own yesterday. If we're a community here, then we should all work together. I believe that. There's a link there if you want to help anyhow. And the only other thing for me to say is, you take care of your loved ones. We'll try and bring you as many facts as we can. But as always, I'll say what I usually do. Bye for now.